Welcome to my daily housing crash update. My name is Jason Ferrier. I'm a realtor. I'm a licensed real estate agent, and I'm an investor here locally in Central Ohio, just outside of Columbus. So I had a viewer actually just this morning mention that, hey, I should do an intro and say who I am. So there you go. There's my intro. Anyway, let's get to the NAR lawsuit settlement aftermath. I'm going to take you under the hood, behind the scenes, behind the curtain, however you want to call it, and kind of tell you what's been going on since the NAR lawsuit was settled. So for those that, and by the way, I'm also going to talk about what this means for you as a buyer, seller, or investor of real estate. So let's get into some background first on what happened with the lawsuit and kind of what changes occurred if you don't already know. And this will be brief, this part here. So the lawsuit was with the National Association of Realtors, was involved in a class action lawsuit that was settled a few months ago. And in August of this year, August 17th, I believe, if my memory serves me right, the new real estate rules went into effect for agents, brokers, buyers, sellers of real estate. And there were some goals with the lawsuit. The lawsuit was really designed to reduce the costs that sellers were paying for the buyer agent commission. So in a lot of situations, you have a home seller who is paying the commission of both the listing agent who's listing the home for sale and the buyer's agent who's bringing a buyer to the table. So the seller is actually paying for both sides of the transaction when it comes to the agents and the realtors' services. Now, that's not a requirement, by the way. It's never been a requirement that sellers pay for, really, sellers don't have to pay any commissions, honestly. Commissions are always negotiable. But nonetheless, there was some complaining by folks out there that said, hey, we're duped into paying these buyer agent commissions, and we don't like that. And we want to pay less commissions as a seller. So this lawsuit was settled, and they also wanted to shift the cost of agents, of the buyer agent to the buyer. So you've got the listing agent basically being paid by the seller, is like, I really think what they wanted to accomplish, and the buyer is paying for the buyer agent. So a lot of people think that makes sense. And quite frankly, I'm not opposed to that. As an agent, as a realtor, I can tell you, I'm really not opposed to that at all. I think people should be able to negotiate their fees and the commissions on what they charge. So the question is, what happened after the settlement? We're 90 days now after the settlement. So what has happened after that? Are we seeing commissions soften? Are we seeing realtors, broke? Are we seeing sellers winning? And are we seeing home prices drop? Because one of the goals that I heard during the lawsuit and all the drama was, hey, we're going to reduce home prices because there won't be greedy agents involved anymore. And now sellers will be able to sell property for less. So that's what we're going to look at today. And I'm going to tell you, or I'm going to kind of take you through what's occurred, if commissions have actually been reduced according to the research I've done. I'm also going to give you some flavor as to what's happened behind the scenes with me as an agent, and if I've seen commissions go down and I've seen commissions reduced, and kind of what the market what changes I've seen in the market since the lawsuit was settled. So remember, the lawsuit was settled August 17th. So we don't have a whole lot of data here. We got like 90 days of data, right? But when it comes to commissions, according to Redfin, this is an article they just published. According to Redfin, the average buyer agent commission, the agent that's actually helping the buyer buy the property, has gone from 2.42% on average to 2.34%. So it's gone down, what? Well, about 0.1%. Is that seasonality? I don't know. We'll have to have a longer runway to find out. But the commission really hasn't changed that much in 90 days, according to Redfin. Now, I also found a company called Account Tech, and they said that buyer agent commissions have gone from 2.72% to 2.74%. So according to Account Tech, commissions have actually gone up for realtors, for buyer agents, helping buyers. They haven't gone down. They've gone up. Kind of interesting. So Redfin says they've gone down. Account Tech says they've gone up. I also found another company called Clever, and they say total commissions. Remember, this is total commissions of both the buyer and the selling agent are now 5.32%, and that's a 5-year low. And if memory serves me now that I'm thinking about it, I think NAR or Realtor.com put out an article that said the commissions are at a 5-year low right now for agents. So a little bit of flavor when it comes to real life situations, because I'm just an average agent, realtor. I don't have a big team. I don't do a ton of transactions, but I do a good amount. And I can tell you that my commissions have not changed really. They haven't changed at all, honestly, as far as the percentage goes. I will say that consumers are more aware. I'm actually surprised at how many consumers, buyers and sellers, know about the lawsuit. They know about the changes that went into effect, and I'm going to get to the actual changes in a minute here. But they are more savvy, and they're asking more questions, which is great. They should. And remember, the commissions are always negotiable. They are. That's just how it is. That's how it's always been. And now I guess they just made it, more clear, I suppose, with the lawsuit. So I do see consumers actually, asking more questions about it. And when I talk to them about the lawsuit and the changes that we're going through, they oftentimes, know what I'm talking about. I run into very few people who are like, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about, which is good. Consumers should be aware. So here are the big changes that occurred with the lawsuit. The biggest one, well, there's two big ones, really. One is that the commission percentage in the MLS, that's the database website, you want to call it, that licensed agents use and realtors use, you can't communicate how much commission you are offering the buyer agent in the MLS anymore. So previous to August, you would put, in the MLS, when I would list a property for a seller, I would actually state how much is the buyer agent going to make on this sale. Now you can't do that. There's no place to put that commission. So what do you think happened? After the lawsuit was settled and whoever was, in charge of the lawsuit and spearheaded the lawsuit, whatever attorney, whatever plaintiff, I don't know what they thought was going to happen with communicating commissions, but there is something called text messages. There's also something called Facebook, and there are websites. Those do exist in the United States today, and I don't see them going away anytime soon. So it's not a big deal to communicate that commission percentage to the other agents via text message, Facebook, websites, or just a phone call. Heck, you could even put a sign up at the property that said, hey, here's how much I'm paying a buyer agent commission on this deal. In other words, they removed a field in the MLS thinking that was going to somehow change things. And from my experience so far, it has done zip to how we communicate with each other. I would say realtors and real estate agents are probably some of the most savvy, entrepreneurial people that I've ran across in my short years on this earth. And so it puzzles me that was something that they were going to make a change on thinking there was going to be any kind of effect from that, because there hasn't been from what I can see. All I have to do is call the agent who's coming to show the property and say, hey, here's how much they're paying. Here's how much the seller's paying you to come show the property on this deal. And oftentimes the buyer agent just calls me ahead of time and says, hey, what's the commission on this deal? Here it is. It's a 10-second text message. So the point is, that was a change they made that I don't think really had any effect whatsoever. The other change they made, and this is the big one. This is the biggest one. And this is where you got to be really careful. Now, as a buyer, you have to sign a buyer agent agreement in order to see a property. So your freedom of, on a Sunday afternoon with your family, you're like, hey, I'm going to go check out these houses that are listed. Make a call to an agent. I want to come see that house. I don't know what I want to buy, Jason. I don't even know you. I have no idea. I'm just starting my house hunt. I'd like to come in and kick the tires, sit in the driver's seat, smell it, right? Walk through the property, get to know you as a realtor, Jason. Those days are gone. Those days are gone unless you sign a buyer agent agreement with me. And this is a national rule, folks. So any property that's listed on the MLS, which is virtually 90% of the properties out there, you have to sign a buyer agent commission in order to schedule a showing. The only exception to that rule is if it's an open house, or it's as an agent, that's really the only exception to the rule. If I have an open house and you're coming to see the open house, you don't have to sign a buyer agent agreement. You can just come into the open house. That's no problem. But beyond that, as a buyer, you're going to have to find a for sale by owner or an off-market property in order not to sign that buyer agent agreement. That's just how it is. So to me, that change is odd, because you are taking away the freedom of buyers to casually look at properties. And there are realtors, there are agents out there, big ones, big ones, who have spun this agreement that into the framing of, well, this is a good time to screen the buyer. If they're not willing to sign the buyer agent agreement, or they're not willing to pay for your services as a buyer, that eliminates them as a prospect. Really? To me anyway, and this is how I do business, I always enjoyed meeting a buyer for the first time at a house, because it gave me, and this is before the agreement was in place, the agreement rule, because it gave us a chance to get to know each other a little bit in real life. Like, hey, walk through the house with me. Tell me what you like about the house. What do you not like? Tell me your story. What are you looking for? What's going on? To me, it was a great chance to build rapport and really understand, number one, do you even really want to buy a house? Do you want to work with me? Do you have another agent you want to use? Maybe you don't need an agent. And so the ability of buyers to just kick the tires and casually look at properties has been removed. It's been removed. And so it is what it is. I follow the rule, but I will tell you that there are some dangers with these agreements, and you have to be really, really careful if you're a buyer and you're looking to buy a property and you're like, all right, call Jason on the phone. I want to see a house. Jason tells you, you got to sign the buyer agent agreement first. Now, so far, buyers have been really cool about it, and that's fine. But I'm not pretending that that's going to happen with every agent and with every buyer, because there's a lot of language in that agreement, in the boilerplate standard agreement that's provided by the Board of Realtors here in Columbus. There's language in that agreement that locks you in as a buyer to that agent, and you owe them money, potentially. Depending on what's in that agreement, you may owe them money for any period of time that is while you're under that, for any house you buy under that agreement. And if that agreement lasts a year and you're not reading it and you just sign it just to see a house, not even paying attention to what's in there, and then you buy a house 2 months later without the agent's help, It could be a house that you saw down the street. You may owe that agent commission. Yikes, right? Yikes. Is that fair to buyers? I don't think it is, but that's the rule we live in. So my first piece of advice on what this means to you and all this hoopla around the lawsuit is to read, and negotiate that buyer agent agreement. Make sure you understand what you're getting into as a buyer. The other thing I would propose to you is go after properties that are off market as a buyer. Go after FSBOs, for sale by owners, where you don't need an agent to see the property. I would also go after open houses because you don't need an agent agreement to buy a property on that. All those are good tactics, perhaps, to, reduce the risk of signing something that you really don't want to sign just to be able to see a house like you used to be able to, last year or before the lawsuit. So to me, as a buyer, you just got to make sure you read that agreement up and down, front and back. If you have any questions about the agreement and you're like, this is a lot of language I don't get, ask the realtor. If you don't get a response that makes sense, check with your attorney. Have your attorney review the agreement before you sign it. So, but that agreement is negotiable by you, the buyer, and all the commissions are negotiable by you, the buyer or the seller. So let's get into sellers real quick. As a seller, what do these changes mean? Will you pay less as a seller now, less in commission? Well, maybe, or maybe not. Because if you're a seller, you have to offer, as a seller, you don't have to offer a commission to the buyer agent. You don't have to, but it may make sense to make that offer of compensation. It could make sense to pay a buyer agent. Why? Well, it takes the responsibility of paying that agent off the buyer. That can help a lot, right? Because the buyer, the agent and the buyer's agent is not going to work for free. They're not going to. So if they're not going to work for free, who's going to pay their commission? The buyer? Where do you think that money is going to come from? You, the seller. It's going to be in the buyer's offer. So as a marketing tactic, it could make sense as a seller to still offer the buyer agent commission. You don't have to, but it could make sense, right? So as a seller, you just have to think about it from a marketing standpoint and say, all right, if I'm a buyer, do I want to pay for my agent directly? Do I want to? No. So I'm going to get it from somewhere. I'm just going to ask the seller to pay for it. That's all I'm going to do. So 6 of one, half a dozen the other. It's coming out of the deal somewhere, unless the buyer doesn't use an agent. That's different, right? So are you confused yet? You may be, but this whole lawsuit definitely hasn't made things easier. Check this out. Yeah, I agree. Hey, what's up? Thanks for the comment. The whole housing buying process is so confusing now. You're right. It is. It can be. It can be confusing. Thanks for that comment. It certainly hasn't gotten easier. I'll say that. So now we know buyers may have to pay for their own agent. They have to sign a buyer agreement to see a property. Sellers don't have to pay for a buyer agent. Never did. They really don't have to pay for a selling agent either. There's nothing against the law that says you have to sell a property with an agent. Sell it on your own. If you don't like these rules, don't use an agent. Don't use one if you don't like the rules. It's not, you're not going to get your arm sawed off because you don't use an agent. Trust me, realtors will be fine. There's plenty of business out there to get. There's just plenty of business to get. So don't use an agent if you don't want to pay these fees. It's that simple, right? List the house yourself. Put a sign in the yard. Put it on Zillow. Put it in the newspaper. I don't know. Put it on Facebook. You can do all kinds of stuff as a property owner. You don't have to follow the traditional methods. And as a buyer, you don't have to use an agent either. Nothing says you have to. Now, oops, got another comment here. What's up? I was looking at a house, and the agent was like, I do 3%. Are you okay with that? Can you pay me? I was like, weird. Oh, it was weird. Yeah, that's a strange way to present it. I do 3%. Are you okay with that? Can you pay me? Wow. Man. Well, look, every agent, every realtor will present this differently. That's for certain. And thanks for the comment. Yeah, very strange. Very strange. They need to learn how to, they need to put themselves in your shoes as the buyer. And in my opinion, and try to understand what would I want? What would Jason want as a buyer? If I want representation from an agent as a home buyer, what do I want? Well, I want to understand the game, the rules of the game. What are the rules? What are the risks here? What are the risks there? What are the benefits here? What are the benefits there? You know, and then let the person make their own decision. But, you know, there are some ways to structure that buyer agreement. And I do this with my clients so that they're not wrapped up into an agreement that they're not comfortable with, or I'm not comfortable with. I don't want to lock myself in with a buyer who may be a pain in the rear and not, you know, and not be an ethical person. I have no idea when I first meet them, just like they don't know about me. So why lock them into a long-term agreement if you're really not sure what's going on? And by the way, most buyers are pretty impatient, right? They want to see the house like tomorrow. They don't have time for a big sit-down meeting where you screen them in your office and like it's 1950. They don't have time for that. They want to like see the house today. All right, structure the agreement, which I do, so we see it for that day, and then you're out of the agreement, no big deal. If you decide to keep working with me, then we talk about a longer-term agreement. That's the way I think it should be done, but that's me. You get a lot of good comments here. I don't know how you say that last part of your name, though. I'm not going to try. So, the Traveler, I'll call you. How do you buy a home without an agent like you suggest? Do you just contact the homeowners now? That's a great question. So, this has actually been happening to me more and more as a listing agent. When I'm listing a home, I have buyers calling me. You can do this a few different ways. Great question. So, you can either find a home that's not on the market, and then you don't have to worry about agents at all. So like a for sale by owner, that's, you know, the seller, the actual owner is selling it. You'll see those in Zillow a lot, or like classifieds, whatever. You'll see those out there. But if the home is listed, you can call the agent directly. And I guess I should have clarified this. If the home's listed, you're still going to have to sign the buyer agent agreement with the listing agent, unless it's an open house. So if it's an open house, you don't have to sign that agreement. But if it's not an open house and it's just listed, and you call the listing agent and say, I want to come see it tomorrow, you're still going to have to sign that buyer agent agreement with the listing agent. But I would push back on anything in there if you don't want to use them as, you know, for help and don't want them to represent you. I would push back on anything in that agreement that locks you in for any period of time, like I was just talking about. But then just explain to them that I'm not using an agent. Go, I don't need a buyer's agent. I'm not using one. Theoretically, there should be a discount there. There should be a discount on that property then if you're not using an agent, because that seller's not paying it, not going to have to pay it. And the listing agent's not going to have to, you know, represent you. So there's no work on their end. So if you don't want to use an agent, just tell the listing agent when you make the appointment, I don't have an agent. I don't want one. But they're still going to make you sign a buyer's agent agreement for the showing. That's the goofy thing. And that's that big change that's taken place, right? But you can easily push back on that agreement and say, make the agreement good for one day for just this property, and make the amount 0 on the agreement. I'm not going to pay you anything because I don't need your help. That's what I would do if I was a buyer. So, you're welcome. I'm glad it helped you. It's hard to explain. I don't know that I did a great job today explaining it, honestly. It's not an easy thing to explain. As I start explaining it, I start thinking, does this make any sense? You know what I mean? It's like one of those weird paradoxical ventures, I suppose. Let me see if I have anything else. So I guess I would say also, if you're a buyer, you should prepare to either pay your buyer agent if you're going to use an agent. Prepare to use that buyer agent. Prepare to pay for that buyer agent, sorry. Or prepare to put it in the offer. Meaning, let's pretend that you're like, Jason, I'm not paying for your services. If I was your buyer agent and you're like, Jason, I'm not going to pay for your services, I want the seller to pay for it. Okay, we go see a house, and that seller is not offering any buyer agent compensation. So at this point, Jason's going to make nothing. Well, I'm not going to work for free. Somebody's going to have to pay me, so we're going to have to put it into the agreement, into the offer, into the purchase offer. I'm going to actually have to write it in there with you and say, hey, part of our offer is that the seller is going to pay for my services. X%, X dollars, whatever we come up with, right? But as you can see, nothing really has changed in the situation with buyers, sellers, and agents. From a compensation standpoint, agents are still getting paid on both sides of the transaction. And if anything, it's made it more difficult on buyers. It's made it especially difficult on first-time buyers and buyers who are buying at entry-level prices and are, let's say, financially, maybe financially struggling. I don't know if struggling is the right word, but if they don't have tons of money to throw around, you know, they don't have millions of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars to throw away, those buyers are going to struggle with this process, because there are going to be situations where the buyer agent compensation is not, it's not handled by the seller. The seller's not going to pay them anything. And so the buyer's going to have to pay for that agent services. And if they're a first-time buyer and they don't know how to buy a house, they need help, they're basically forced into paying a buyer agent then out of their pockets. So how many first-time home buyers do you know that can pay 3% of the sale price, 2%, 1% of the sale price in extra fees when they're buying their first home and they're already somewhat early in their financial life, if you want to say it, life cycle? Not many. That's a struggle. So I think you'll see first-time home buyer percentages slip, and that may force more people to keep renting. That's not a great situation at all. It's just not. I would say that the first-time home buyers and Generation Z, millennial home buyers are the ones that are losing the most out of this situation. I think they are. So I'd love to hear what you have to think. Thanks for the comments today. They helped a lot. I hope this made sense. I hope this helped you navigate a little bit if you're out there thinking about buying a house. But obviously, you can comment or on any video, ask me a question on there. I'll try to answer it. But there's probably a lot of good realtors in your market, wherever you are, a lot of good agents that understand this and know that there are ways to navigate with it, navigate around it, through it, to help you and not make it so, not make it so difficult on the buyer. I guess maybe even the seller, but it's certainly a change, but I'm not sure it's a change for the better. And quite frankly, like I said, it hasn't changed my commission amounts. I've been watching them and kind of studying that, since the lawsuit. And my commissions haven't gone down. They haven't gone up. They kind of stayed the same, much like this data shows us. So I guess that brings us to the last point. Home prices. Do you think this is going to reduce home prices? Let me ask you a question. If I am buying your house from you and there's no agent involved and it's just you and me, this is like back in the day, right? Just you and me, we're working together. Because you're not paying an agent, are you going to reduce how much you can charge for your house? Are you going to say, hey, Jason would pay $200,000 for the house, but because there's no agent involved, I'm going to charge him $190,000 and I'm going to take $10,000 less? Do you think people are going to do that? You think people are going to walk away from $10,000 because there's not a realtor involved? Come on. No, I doubt it. So hence, I don't think it's going to change home prices. I really don't. I don't see it reducing the cost of a house at all. It's just made things more difficult on consumers. So there's somebody that was in charge of the lawsuit somewhere. I think it was in Missouri. And there's a plaintiff somewhere that maybe had good intentions at one point, but oops, this is the result you get. So it is what it is. But regardless, this is my daily housing crash update, a unique one today for sure. And I hope you have a great day. I hope you go out and find a deal. I hope you make a disrespectful offer to somebody on a house and find something that's under market value. And I hope you find an off-market property. I hope you find a property and you're not using a realtor at all. That would give you the ultimate freedom, right? So having said that, if you need some help in the Ohio area, in Central Ohio in particular, my information's below. I'm happy to do whatever I can to make you to help you be a successful home buyer, seller, or investor. All right. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow morning.